The first official report was logged in October 2001 by Inspector Wang of the Taiwan Railway Administration, tasked with checking a seismically damaged, abandoned stretch of the Alishan line. He expected silence. What he heard was music, a clear, plaintive melody resonating from the cold steel, as if the rails were giant, tense violin strings. He recorded it. Back at the station, older Adayal workers recognized it instantly. It was the song of the lost hunter, a traditional tune not widely known, specific to a tribe that had lived in that exact valley centuries prior. The rails were singing a dead language. Engineers blamed aeolian vibration, wind through the tunnel, but Inspector Wang's log noted a critical detail. There was no wind. The air was perfectly still. The sound was emanating from the rails themselves, as if the metal was remembering a vibration it had absorbed a century ago, and was now slowly, painstakingly replaying it into the silent mountain night. The mountain had begun its broadcast. Acoustic analysts at National Taiwan University confirmed the impossibility. The recording displayed a pure, structured, pentatonic scale, the foundation of Adayal music. There were no chaotic harmonics, typical of metal stress. Most strikingly, the rails sustained a perfect concert pitch A, 440 Hz, for over 30 seconds. Rusted, uneven steel under natural tension cannot do that. It would produce a messy, decaying tone. Dr. Lin, the lead researcher, wrote, "The rails are behaving less like a physical object and more like a playback needle on a geological record." The 1999 quake must have created a unique stress lattice in the surrounding bedrock, which now mechanically excites the rails with precise frequencies. But this raised a deeper question. How could random seismic fracturing encode a specific cultural melody? The mountain, it seemed, hadn't just cracked. It had composed, and its first composition was a ghost song from its own cultural memory. The breakthrough came from cross-disciplinary collaboration. A geologist, Dr. Chen, mapped the microscopic fracture network created by the 1999 quake in the tunnel's granite. A musicologist then transposed the rail's song into a seismic spectrogram. The correlation was chilling. The mountain's wounds were the song's sheet music. Longer, deeper fractures corresponded to sustained low notes. Complex, branching micro-cracks created intricate melodic runs. The quake hadn't just damaged the mountain, it had inadvertently programmed it, using the geometry of its trauma to store acoustic information. The rails bolted into this fractured soundboard were simply the speakers. The mountain was a phonograph, and the earthquake's violence was the stylus that had cut the first record into living stone. It was a geological accident of terrifying beauty, a natural machine for remembering sound. For years, the song was static, a perfect, looping ghost. Then, in the late 2010s, it changed. Hikers and researchers reported new phrases, unfamiliar melodies woven into the old Atayal tune. Acoustic analysis revealed the source. The mountain was incorporating modern sounds. snippets of conversations, ringtones, music from portable speakers. If a sound was made near the rails with enough volume and emotional charge, laughter, a loud argument, a beloved song, it would be sampled. Weeks or months later, fragments would reappear, altered and harmonized with the original geological song. The mountain wasn't just a playback device. It was a learning composer. The fracture network acted like a complex, slow neural net with sound vibrations physically stressing the cracks, creating new, permanent microfractures that stored the new memory. The living archive was no longer just about the past. It was actively recording the present. The most terrifying evolution was predictive. In 2022, the rail's song developed a new, persistent motif, a slow, descending glissando, a continuous slide from a high pitch to a very low one. Seismologists at the Central Weather Bureau were alarmed. This glissando's frequency pattern perfectly matched the theoretical seismic fingerprint of a catastrophic, deep crustal rupture along a nearby fault line, a quake predicted by models, but not considered imminent. The mountain wasn't just remembering past quakes, it was simulating future ones. The theory, immense, building tectonic stresses deep below were generating ultra-low frequency vibrations, inaudible to humans, but acting as a new stylus, slowly etching the prophecy of the coming quake into the ever-sensitive fracture network. The rails were singing the mountain's death song, a real-time audiograph of the tectonic tension that would one day tear it apart. Fearing public panic and the destabilizing effect of a constant doomsday hum, authorities authorized a suppression operation. Engineers clad the most vocal sections of rail in layered rubber and lead dampeners, designed to absorb all vibration. For 72 hours, the tunnel fell silent. The first readings showed success. Then, on the fourth day, the dampeners themselves began to vibrate, emitting a distorted, muffled version of the song. The mountain had rerouted the acoustic energy through the bedrock into the tunnel walls, using the dampeners as inefficient but still functional speakers. The attempt to silence it had only forced the phenomenon to evolve, becoming more diffuse and harder to contain. A senior engineer's report concluded bleakly, "You cannot mute the landscape. The song is not in the rails. The rails are merely a symptom. The song is in the mountain's bones, and it will find a way to sing." While officials saw a hazard, others saw a oracle. An underground collective, the listeners, formed. It included Atayal shamans who believed the mountain's ancestor was finally speaking. Sound artists treating it as the world's largest natural instrument. And activists who saw it as a cry of ecological distress. They began meticulous, unauthorized monitoring, believing the song's evolution held keys not just to seismology, but to a deeper environmental truth. They discovered the song intensified before heavy rainfall, changed tone during pollution spikes from distant factories, and incorporated the specific frequencies of endangered bird calls from the valley. The mountain wasn't just a seismic recorder, it was a biospheric polygraph, singing the total health of the ecosystem. with the coming quake just the loudest note in a symphony of interconnected stress. The man who first documented the song, Inspector Wang, retired and became a recluse, obsessed with the tunnel. In 2023, he vanished. Search teams found his recording equipment and journal at the tunnel's heart. The final entry was not text, but a meticulously drawn musical phrase, the doom glissando, with a cryptic note. The song is not a prediction. It is an invitation. The mountain is not dying. It is preparing to change its state. The quake is its crescendo. We are not separate from the song. We are notes within it. His body was never found. The listeners interpreted his disappearance not as a tragedy, but as a merging. Wang had stopped listening from the outside and had, in some metaphysical or literal way, allowed himself to be absorbed into the frequency, becoming part of the mountain's ongoing composition. The Alishan phenomenon was not unique, just the most articulate. Reports trickled in from other world seismic zones. A low hum along a section of Japan's Hokkaido fault, a rhythmic knocking in deep Italian mines, unexplained harmonic tremors picked up by sensors on the San Andreas. It appeared that under the right conditions of rock type, fracture geometry, and human-made strings, rails, pipelines, cables, stressed geology could become acoustically active. Taiwan's rails were the world's most refined example. A new field, geological sonics, was born. The theory: the Earth doesn't just move silently. Under immense strain, it sings. And we had only just learned to hear its voice. A voice currently rehearsing a chorus of continental-scale transformation. A joint Taipei-MIT project created Chorus, an AI designed not to predict the quake, but to interpret the full song. Fed decades of audio, seismic, meteorological, and ecological data, Chorus began to output its own compositions, synthesized music that translated the mountain's complex stress language into something humanly comprehensible. Its first major piece, Elegy for a Valley, was performed by a national orchestra. It wasn't just beautiful. It was accurate. Sections of swelling strings correlated with periods of documented tectonic strain. A sudden, silent pause in the music matched the week a nearby polluting factory was shut down. Chorus revealed the song to be a perfect, real-time symphonic data model of the region. The AI's conclusion: the coming quake's glissando was not an ending, but a key change, a necessary, violent transition to a new, stable movement in the planet's endless composition. Driven by Chorus's findings, a team attempted two-way communication. They broadcast the mountain's own processed song back at it through powerful subwoofers coupled with the bedrock. The hypothesis: if the fracture network was a neural net, perhaps it could learn through feedback. The result was instantaneous and chilling. The rail's song didn't just change, it mirrored and elaborated. It took the broadcasted phrase, transposed it, and added a new, complex countermelody. It was a musical conversation. Over weeks, a call and response pattern developed. The human-made phrases were simple, logical. The mountain's replies were beautiful, chaotic, and laden with seismic data. The team realized they weren't talking to an it. They were engaging a geological intelligence, a mind made of crystal bonds and tectonic pressure, whose language was vibration and whose thoughts were symphonies of strain. We had said hello to the earth, and it was answering in sonatas. The phenomenon breached its mountain prison. As the predicted quake's stress field expanded, it began to excite metal infrastructure across central Taiwan. In Taipei, engineers reported unexplained harmonics in new skyscraper frames. Bridge cables hummed at dawn. The urban jungle became a discordant choir, its tune synchronizing with the Alishan Rail's core frequency. The mountain's song was using the island's own web of steel as a massive antenna, broadcasting its stress state. This wasn't paranormal. It was physics. The entire region was becoming a single, tense instrument. The public, once unaware, could now hear it. A faint, omnipresent drone underpinning city life. A constant auditory reminder of the geological tension building beneath their feet. The mountain's private performance had become a public broadcast where some saw doom, others saw data. Hedge funds and reinsurance companies hired their own geosonic analysts. They discovered correlations between specific melodic shifts in the public urban hum and subtle changes in local market sentiment, supply chain delays, even tourism rates. The mountain stress song was indirectly influencing the human economy. A new, morbid market emerged, betting on the glissando's progression. More legitimately, construction firms raced to develop harmonic dampening materials for buildings, not just to survive the quake, but to silence the anxiety-inducing hum. The phenomenon had birthed its own economy, a parasitic financial sector feeding on the planet's audible distress calls, trying to monetize the song of the apocalypse. For the Atayal elders, science was catching up to myth. Their oral history spoke of Rutuk's Daga, the spirit of the land, which slept within mountains, dreaming the world. A great quake was not a disaster, but the spirit turning in its sleep, its dream changing, reshaping reality. The song was the dream becoming audible. The descending glissando was the final, deep breath before the turn. The elders did not prepare for disaster. They prepared for transformation. They saw Inspector Wang's disappearance as a crossing over, a person becoming part of the spirit's new dream. This perspective reframed everything. The coming event was not an ending to fear, but a painful, necessary birth of a new geological and cultural era, announced by a lullaby sung in steel and stone. In early 2024, the glissando crossed the theoretical point of no return. Its frequency now indicated the subsurface stresses had reached a state where a release was not just likely, but mechanically inevitable. The seismic early warning system switched to a permanent, quiet alarm, a state of guaranteed pending event. Yet, no panic ensued. A strange collective calm descended. The song had been a warning for so long that its final shift felt like a resolution. Evacuation plans were impossible for an island-wide event. Instead, a focus on resilient acceptance took hold. Building codes were urgently updated, not to prevent collapse, but to ensure singing failure modes. Structures designed to harmonize with quake frequencies, to break beautifully and safely, like the mountain itself. Humanity was not fleeing the song. It was learning to sing along with the breaking world. Abandoning suppression, a team of engineers and musicians embarked on a final, radical experiment. The symphonic dampener. Instead of fighting the vibration, they would give it a perfect outlet, transforming chaotic, ground-ripping waves into a single, monumental chord that would dissipate energy upwards into the atmosphere. It was a gamble to turn an earthquake into the world's largest and briefest concert. The structure was tuned to the frequency of the glissando's projected endpoint. It now stood silent, a stringless violin, waiting for the planet's bow to strike. 2 days before the scientific prediction window, the song stopped. The ever-present urban hum ceased. The rails were mute. The mountain, after years of increasingly complex noise, fell into a profound, terrifying silence. Seismographs still showed immense building strain, but the acoustic release valve had closed. Scientists interpreted this as the final locking of the fault, the maximum tension before the snap. The silence was heavier than any sound. It felt like the entire island was a drawn bowstring. The listeners gathered, not with recording gear, but in meditation. They believed this was the moment Inspector Wang described, the mountain inhaling, holding the note of the old world inside, preparing to exhale the new one. In the absolute quiet, you could almost hear the future, waiting. The earthquake did not begin with a shake. It began with a note, a deep, fundamental frequency, the pure tone the glissando had been forecasting, erupted from the lithosphere. It was heard and felt simultaneously, a physical sound that vibrated viscera and own. The symphonic dampener activated, ringing like a colossal bell, shaping the raw seismic noise into a sustained, crushing chord. Buildings designed to sing groaned in harmonic resonance, their flexible frames dancing rather than shattering. For 7 seconds, the island was an instrument played by the planet itself. The violence was not in chaos, but in this terrible, beautiful, overwhelming harmony of destruction. It was the mountain's crescendo, the moment its song transitioned from prophecy to physical law. The major quake occurred. Damage was significant, but the singing architecture and precise warnings minimized loss of life. In the aftermath, as crews assessed the damage, they noticed the sound. The rails, now severed and twisted, hummed again. But the song was different. Gone was the complex, anxious symphony of strain. In its place was a simple, stable, repeating lullaby in a major key, a song of release, of balance restored. The mountain's fracture network had been rewritten by the quake. The old memory grooves of stress were erased, replaced by the new, calm geometry of settled rock. The mountain was no longer singing of future trauma. It was singing of the present peace, a geological sigh of relief. The prophecy was over. The lullaby had begun. Inspector Wang was declared dead. Humans could join the song, not as conductors, but as notes. The mountain's archive was now a collective one, storing not just environmental data, but human stories, fears, and ultimately a strange form of peace. Wang's final note had been the silence before the crescendo. His eternal note was now part of the lullaby. The Alishan event birthed a new scientific discipline, terrasonics. The goal was no longer just to predict quakes, but to interpret the Earth's acoustic health. Humanity could move from fearful reaction to nuanced understanding, anticipating not just quakes, but landslides, volcanic unrest, even groundwater depletion. The Earth was no longer a silent partner. It was a broadcasting entity, and we had finally learned the basics of its grammar. The age of deaf geology was over. Society internalized the lesson. Architecture evolved to incorporate, not resist, vibration. Acoustic facades on buildings turned wind into ambient soundscapes, linked to real-time seismic monitors. Resonance gardens became popular, where visitors could touch sculptures that translated the deep, inaudible hum of a stable fault into a peaceful, tactile vibration. The constant low-level anxiety about the next big one was replaced by a philosophy of attuned coexistence. People learned to listen to the ground beneath them, not with fear, but with the respectful attention one gives to a sleeping giant's breathing. The mountain's song had taught them that stability is not silence. It is a dynamic, audible equilibrium. One profound mystery remained unsolved. How does chaos create such order? A random, violent earthquake had fractured rock in a pattern that could encode and replay complex music. Physicists and philosophers debated. Was it a staggering coincidence? The right song, the right rock, the right rails? Or did it suggest a deeper principle? That under duress, complex systems, from geological formations to human minds, naturally tend toward expressive pattern, even art. That trauma, when recorded by a sufficiently complex medium, doesn't produce noise, but narrative. The mountain song challenged the boundary between random natural event and intentional communication. It implied a universe where even destruction has a syntax, and catastrophe can have a melody. This story is not just about a mountain in Taiwan. It's a metaphor for living on a conscious planet. Your city, your home, sits atop geological structures under constant, subtle stress. What is it saying? We are surrounded by data streams, seismic, electromagnetic, atmospheric, that we ignore as noise. The story of the singing rails asks, what if that noise is a song waiting to be heard? What patterns are hidden in the stress of your daily life, your environment, your society? The first step is to change your mindset from seeing the world as inert to hearing it as active, to ask not just what is happening, but what is being expressed. The answer might not be a prophecy. It might be a lullaby, or a warning, or a work of art written in the language of physics. You can practice this awareness now. It's called attunement. Sit quietly. Feel for the faintest vibrations in your environment. The subsonic rumble of traffic, the hum of infrastructure, the settling of your building. Instead of dismissing it as background noise, pause. Imagine it is a signal, the collective voice of the engineered and natural world you inhabit. This isn't mysticism. It's a cognitive shift. By acknowledging these vibrations as a form of constant, low-level communication from your environment, you begin to break the illusion of separateness. You start to hear the world not as a static stage, but as a living, vibrating participant in your existence. The singing rails began with one man listening to what others called creaking metal. It starts with choosing to listen. Looking forward, we might create a symphonic planet. A global network of sensors could translate the Earth's real-time vibrations, tectonic shifts, ocean currents, atmospheric waves, into a continuous, public musical composition. Not as a warning, but as a celebration. A planet-wide orchestra playing its own existence. This would be the ultimate legacy of the Alishan Rails, turning humanity from exploiters of a silent rock into audience and co-composers of a living world's grand opus. Our technology, instead of drowning out nature's voice, would become its amplifier and translator, fostering a deep, empathic connection to the dynamic planet we call home through the universal language of sound. We end where we began, but everything is different. The tunnel is a monument, not a mystery. The rails are silent relics. The forest has reclaimed the scar, its new growth louder than the old song. The symphonic dampener stands as a sculpture, emitting a soft, engineered tone that harmonizes with the wind. A human-made note added to the mountain's new score. The anxiety is gone. What remains is a profound lesson written in stone, steel, and sound. That the world is not silent. That crisis can have a melody. And that if we learn to listen, truly listen, to the stresses in our systems, whether geological or social, we might not prevent the breaking, but we can learn to break beautifully and hear the lullaby that comes after. This film was made by listening. Credits roll, not just for the filmmakers, but for the ensemble. The seismologists who parsed prophecy from vibration. The Atayal elders who provided the lexicon of myth. The sound artists who taught us to hear beauty in data. The engineers who built an instrument from a damper. And the anonymous listeners who believed the mountain had something to say long before the proof arrived. Most of all, to Inspector Wang, whose first recording was an act of faith in his own ears. The greatest discoveries begin not with an answer, but with a question whispered to the silence. What are you trying to say? And so, the story of the singing rails concludes not with a period, but with a sustained note. The note is this present moment, the vibration of your attention, the hum of the device you're using, the subtle tension in your own body. The world is always singing. The question shifted from what will happen to what is happening right now in the song of here. The future is a glissando we can't fully control. The past is a reported melody, but the present is a note you are living inside. You can fear its resolution, or you can learn to sing along. The mountain's final lesson is simple. To be alive is to be part of the music. Listen, and then add your voice. The film is over. The screen is dark. But the lesson is an echo. It asks you to carry this awareness out of the story and into your world. The next time you feel a vibration, in the subway, in your chest during stress, in the floorboards of an old house, remember the mountain. Remember that what seems like noise might be a message. What feels like breaking might be a change of key. You are not separate from the symphony of forces around you. You are the participant. So, what will you do with your note? Will you let it be noise, or will you listen for its place in the chord? The choice is yours. The world is singing. The only real question left is, will you choose to hear it?